All week, he promised my 40th birthday would blow my mind, and he said it with that confident smile that made me believe we were finding our way back. So I went to sleep with hope in my chest and woke to a house so quiet it felt emptied of me. No coffee brewing, no footsteps, no note, just air that would not move. And then at noon, my phone lit up, and there they were on my screen. My husband and my own children and his sister clinking glasses in a rooftop pool in Dubai, laughing like I had never existed. And in that instant, the gift arrived exactly as he said it would, because my mind did blow. Not from joy, but from the kind of truth that strips a person clean. And I decided this story would not end with me crying at a kitchen table. Thank you for watching and for giving me a little of your time. It means more than I can say. And before I go deeper into my story, I would love to know where you are watching from. So please tell me in the comments, because every story feels less heavy when it is shared with others. That morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, the one that should have been pulled back by the man who vowed to stand by me on every birthday and every storm. But instead, it was just me listening to the tick of the clock on the wall. I tried to calm myself by saying maybe they were out picking up a cake. Maybe they had planned something that I could not yet see. Maybe the silence was just part of the surprise. But deep inside my chest, I felt the hollowness of truth, pressing harder with each passing minute. I sipped water that tasted like dust and kept looking at the door, hoping for footsteps that never came. And the weight of that loneliness pressed on me until even the walls of my home seemed to lean back from me as though they too wanted no part of my birthday. I sat there with the clock ticking louder than ever, and memories began to press into my mind. Memories of all the years I had poured myself into that family. The birthdays I had stayed up late to decorate the living room for. The cakes I had baked from scratch with tired hands after long days. The gifts I had chosen with care, even when money was tight. All to see their smiles, to hear their laughter, to make them feel celebrated. I remembered how I would iron his shirt before his work dinners, how I would cut corners on myself so the children could have the best shoes, the nicest backpacks, the little things that made their worlds brighter. And never once did I think twice about giving, because love, I thought, was about sacrifice, about holding up the ones you loved so they could stand taller. As I looked at the empty house that morning, I realized how blind I had been to the small warnings, the forgotten anniversaries that were brushed off with excuses. The times he said he was too tired to talk, the way the children had started spending more time whispering with their aunt than with me. But I told myself it was just life-changing, just family growing. I never let myself see it for what it was. That morning, though, in the silence of my own kitchen, those pieces came together. And they painted a picture that broke my heart. Because it was not just that they had left me behind on my birthday. It was that they had been leaving me behind for years, slowly, quietly, until finally they had gone to another country and celebrated life without even remembering that I was part of it. I held on to the edge of the table and felt my chest tighten. Not from anger yet, but from grief so deep it felt like I was mourning while still breathing. And I whispered to myself, how could the people I gave everything to treat me as though I was nothing at all? I stayed in that chair with my hands pressed against the wood, and the weight of everything I had done for them filled my chest until it felt like I could hardly breathe. All those nights, I went without sleep planning birthdays, wrapping gifts, and cooking meals that no one but me seemed to remember. I thought of the sacrifices I had made quietly, giving up little things for myself so they could shine brighter. And I realized how many signs I had ignored, the missed anniversaries, the cold excuses, the whispers I brushed aside. That morning the silence told me what I had refused to see, that slowly they had been leaving me behind. And now they had left me completely. And in that moment, grief washed over me, not as tears, but as a heavy truth. That the people I gave everything to had chosen to live as though I did not exist. I sat there holding on to that truth until it felt like it was pressing against every bone in my body. And though I tried to swallow it down, it refused to leave. It kept rising inside me, making me feel smaller and smaller with each breath. I turned to the window, hoping the sunlight would comfort me. But even the light seemed cold that day, falling across the empty chairs, reminding me how little space I seemed to take up in their world. My mind kept circling back to the days when I was the one holding it all together. When my hands tied ribbons on birthday boxes, when my laughter filled the room as they blew out candles, when I stayed up late stitching costumes or scrubbing clothes so they could stand in front of others looking cared for and loved. Every sacrifice I made had been a promise to them, and I believed love would always circle back, that one day they would look at me and see all I had poured out. But that morning proved me wrong in a way I never imagined. The silence in that house was louder than shouting. It wrapped around me like a cruel blanket, reminding me I had been left behind, and yet my heart refused to accept it fully. I told myself maybe there was a misunderstanding, maybe a surprise waiting just outside, maybe they were about to walk in carrying balloons and laughter. But my eyes kept drifting to my phone, and my hands shook as I finally picked it up. I thought I would see a message, a missed call, even a single word from them. But instead, the screen lit up with something that froze me still. A picture, then another, then a video. There they were, my husband and the children, all of them smiling under a golden sun I had never seen, lounging by a rooftop pool, clinking glasses filled with sparkling drinks, while I sat at a table alone. At first my breath caught in disbelief. I thought my eyes had tricked me. But then I saw the tags, the captions, the comments from friends congratulating them on their trip, calling it perfect, calling it unforgettable. And in the center of it all was his arm around them, his grin wider than I had seen in years, and there was not a single mention of me, not even a shadow of my name in their joy. They had not just forgotten me, they had erased me, as though I did not belong in their story anymore. The betrayal was not hidden behind closed doors. It was displayed to the world, like a trophy they were proud of, and the cruelty of it cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. My hands went cold, my chest tightened, and a sound escaped me that was neither a cry nor a scream. It was something in between, the voice of a woman who realized her place in the family she built had been sold off for luxury and laughter under a foreign sky. I could not look away. Every new photo was another knife. Every laugh they shared without me was another reminder of the emptiness I sat in. And while the world scrolled past their happiness, I sat in silence, tears slipping down my cheeks, not from weakness, but from the weight of knowing I had been cast aside. It was not just a trip, it was a declaration. They wanted joy without me, and they wanted me to see it. I sat frozen with the phone still in my hand, staring at their laughter on the screen, and the longer I looked, the more the memories began to twist inside me. Memories of how I had been the one to hold them together when storms came, how I had worked extra hours, cooked late meals, smiled through exhaustion, only to be treated as if I was a burden in the very life I had built. My mind kept replaying the way he used to look at me when we were young, the promises whispered in the dark that I thought meant forever. But now all I could see was his smile stretched wide for someone else's camera, his happiness displayed while I was left behind in silence. I thought of the children too, how I had rocked them through fevers, cheered at their little triumphs, tucked them in night after night, believing that my love would root deep in them. Yet there they were, grinning as though their mother's absence was nothing more than a footnote, as though the woman who raised them was invisible. It felt like betrayal upon betrayal, not just from him, but from the very ones I had poured my soul into. And the pain of that realization was sharper than anything I had faced before. My heart ached with questions that had no answers. How could they go so far without me? How could they laugh knowing I was alone on a day meant to be filled with love? How could they post pictures for the world but not send me a single word? I pressed my palm against my chest as though I could hold my heart steady, but it thudded wildly, reminding me of the truth I could no longer deny. This was not forgetfulness. This was choice. They had chosen to celebrate without me, to live a life that pushed me out of the frame. And in that moment, I knew something inside me was breaking, but something else was also beginning to rise. A quiet fire that told me I would not sit forgotten forever. I sat there with the quiet fire spreading through me, And for the first time that day I felt my tears dry up, because grief had already done its part, and what settled in its place was something stronger, something that told me I had a choice. I could sit in that chair forever and let them erase me, or I could stand up and take back the pieces of myself they thought they could throw away. My hands trembled as I set the phone down, but it was not weakness anymore. It was the weight of a decision forming inside me, a decision that would change everything. I walked slowly through the house, touching the walls I had painted, the photographs that still hung where I had placed them, the reminders of a life I had built with love, and I realized how much of myself I had given away without keeping anything back for me. Every corner of that house carried my fingerprints, every memory tied to sacrifices I had made. And yet the people who filled it with laughter were gone, choosing to be happy somewhere else, pretending I did not exist. My chest rose with a steady breath as I whispered to myself that I would no longer live as a shadow in my own story. I went back to the table, sat down once more, and pulled a notepad from the drawer. My pen scratched against the paper, each line steadier than the last, as I wrote out what I needed to do, who I needed to call, and the steps that would remind them that I was not invisible, not forgotten, not disposable. In that moment, with the silence still hanging heavy around me, I felt the faintest trace of strength return. The kind of strength that is born when a woman has been pushed too far and decides she will no longer wait for anyone else to save her. With the list resting in front of me, I felt my pulse steady, and for the first time that day the silence in the house no longer frightened me, it fueled me, because I realized that silence could also mean freedom. The kind that comes when you stop begging to be seen and start acting for yourself. I reached for the phone again, not to scroll through their smiling faces, but to make a call that mattered. The call to the travel agency where all the bookings had been placed under the same account that still carried my name. My voice was calm when I gave them the details, calm when I asked them to cancel the return flight, calm when I made sure the arrangements that had excluded me would not bring them back so easily. When the call ended, I sat back in my chair and exhaled a breath that felt like it had been trapped inside me for years, because in that moment I had shifted the balance. They thought they could erase me with a plane ticket, with a poolside toast, with a photograph posted for strangers to admire. But they forgot I was still here, and I still held more power than they realized. I let that truth settle in me like a quiet victory, not the kind that shouts or dances, but the kind that waits, steady and unshakable, for the moment when those who betrayed you finally face what they have done. When I set the phone down after that call, I sat in the quiet again, but it no longer felt like abandonment. It felt like the beginning of something I had never dared to claim for myself. And the more I thought about it, the stronger that feeling became. I walked through each room of the house slowly, letting my eyes rest on the small details of a life I had carried for so long. The framed pictures, the curtains I had chosen, the chipped mugs in the kitchen that had held countless mornings of coffee and tea. For years I had told myself these walls were mine because I had filled them with love. But that morning showed me that a house is only a home when the people inside respect the one who built it. And what I had been left with was not respect. It was indifference dressed up as comfort. I stopped in front of the front door and ran my hand along the lock, the same lock that had been turned so many nights when I waited for him to come home late, sometimes with excuses, sometimes with the smell of someone else's perfume clinging to his shirt. And I realized that even then I had chosen silence. I had told myself I was protecting the family, that enduring pain quietly was the price of keeping everyone together. But all it did was teach them that I would always accept being second, that I would always let myself be overlooked. And now, with them halfway across the world smiling for strangers, it was as if all those years of silence had brought me to this exact moment. So I called the locksmith. My voice didn't tremble when I explained I needed every lock in the house changed. I watched him work, each turn of his tool echoing like a drumbeat of freedom, each new key pressed into my hand like a small piece of power returned. When he left, I stood at that door holding the cool metal in my palm, And for the first time in years, I felt the house belonged to me. Not as a caretaker, not as a woman waiting for scraps of attention, but as the one who had earned every brick with her sacrifices. I sat down afterward and opened my phone, not to torture myself with their pictures, but to make my own statement, a message not written in anger, but in truth. I took a picture of the new lock glinting in the light and posted it with a caption that read, "Turns out, the gift was freedom." I didn't tag anyone, I didn't explain, but I knew they would see it, and I knew the world would read it differently. Some as a joke, some as a quiet message, but only those who knew me would understand the weight of those words. As I looked at that post on the screen, I felt a calm wash over me, because I had turned their betrayal into a moment that belonged to me. They had expected me to sit waiting in tears, they had counted on my silence, but instead I had answered in a way they could never undo. My heart still ached, the wound of their absence still raw, but underneath it was a new strength, the kind that whispers you are more than what they left behind. You are more than the laughter they shared without you. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the quiet fill me again. Not as loneliness this time, but as proof that I could stand on my own, and that when they came back, nothing in this house would be as they left it. Days passed slowly after that, but they were not the same kind of days I had endured before. They were different, filled with a quiet strength that grew stronger every time I looked around and saw the locks glinting in the light, every time I walked through the house, knowing that it finally answered to me, and not to those who had chosen to betray me. I woke each morning without waiting for voices to greet me, without listening for footsteps on the stairs, and though the silence was still there, it no longer cut into me. Instead, it settled around me like a shield, reminding me that I had taken back something they thought I would never dare to claim. I kept myself busy, writing down the steps that needed to follow, calling my lawyer, making sure the accounts they had always relied on were no longer open for them to drain without thought. Each conversation was like a stone laid on a new foundation, one I was building for myself, steady, strong, and untouchable. And when the sun dipped in the evening and I sat in my chair, I no longer stared at the door hoping it would open. I stared at it, knowing that when it did, they would not be walking into the same home they left. There was peace in that thought, but also anticipation, because I knew the moment was coming, the one where their laughter would be replaced with shock, where their return would not be a triumph but a reckoning. I pictured their faces as they dragged their bags across the porch, expecting comfort, expecting forgiveness, expecting life to be waiting for them unchanged. I pictured the way their hands would reach for keys that no longer fit, their confusion turning into disbelief, and I let that vision hold me steady. And in those days of waiting, I also learned something about myself, something I had not seen clearly until then, that strength does not always roar, it does not always shout or break things to prove it is real. Sometimes, strength is sitting in silence, standing your ground, and refusing to be erased. I realized that what they gave me on my birthday was not absence, it was clarity, a cruel kind of clarity that forced me to see where I truly stood. And with that knowledge, I was no longer broken, I was ready. The day finally came when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway, the thud of doors closing, the shuffle of luggage being dragged across the path, and though my heart began to beat faster, I did not move from my chair. I stayed still, steady, waiting for the moment that I had pictured over and over again. Through the window, I saw them smiling, tanned from the sun, full of the glow of days spent in luxury. Their laughter carrying into the air as if the world had not shifted at all. As if I was still the same woman who would open the door with a forgiving smile. But the moment their hands touched the door handle, the moment they pushed the key in and found it would not turn, I watched the first crack spread across their faces, confusion written plainly in the furrow of his brow, and in the nervous glances exchanged between them. And as they jiggled the key again and again, their voices rose in disbelief, asking one another how this could be, certain that it must be a mistake. I stayed where I was, my breathing even, my hand resting lightly on the arm of the chair, because I had waited for this very moment, and I wanted them to feel it, to stand there realizing that the comfort they had left behind so carelessly was no longer theirs to claim. The knocking started soon after, heavy at first, then sharp and impatient, and I heard his voice call my name, trying to sound calm, though the edge of panic had already crept in. When I didn't answer, he grew louder, the questions turning into demands, the demands into pleading. But I remained still, and in the space between his words, I could hear the sound of the children shifting uneasily, their laughter from Dubai suddenly replaced with the weight of reality pressing down on them. I stood at last, not to open the door but to slide the thick envelope across the floor, the one I had prepared carefully, the one sealed with a truth they would never be able to ignore. The noise on the other side quieted as he picked it up, the rustling of paper filling the air before his voice broke through, reading lines that cut the ground out from beneath him. I had laid it all bare in that letter. The closure of accounts, the transfer of assets, the decisions I had made to ensure they could never again build joy on my back while leaving me in the shadows. Every word was deliberate, not written in anger, but in finality. And as he stumbled through it, I could hear the disbelief thicken his tone, as though it was impossible for him to imagine a world where I no longer stood waiting to forgive. Their whispers carried through the door, hushed questions from the children, shock in every syllable, and I could almost see the way their faces had shifted, from pride to panic, from comfort to cold reality. For years they had leaned on me as if I was a fixture, as if I would never move, never stand, never claim my own strength, and now the very ground they stood on had changed, and they had no choice but to feel what it was like to be left on the outside. I turned from the door, letting their voices fade into the background, and I walked deeper into the house that finally belonged to me. Each step felt like a declaration, each breath like a reminder that this chapter was no longer theirs to write. They had taken my birthday, a day meant to honor life, and turned it into betrayal, but I had taken it back, transformed it into a beginning, and though their shouts carried on behind me, I no longer carried them in my heart. I settled back into my chair, calm now, steady, and for the first time I allowed myself to smile. Not out of spite, but out of freedom, because what they had tried to break had only built me stronger. My 40th birthday was not forgotten. It was remembered in the cruelest way, but it had also become the day I walked out of the cage of their neglect and into the light of my own dignity. And as their knocks grew weaker, as their voices began to fade, I closed my eyes and let the silence hold me, no longer a reminder of loneliness, but a psalm of strength that belonged only to me. I stayed there in that quiet, feeling the weight of the years fall off me little by little, and for once I did not rush to fill the silence with excuses or forgiveness. I simply let it be, because silence had always been my punishment, but now it was my strength. The house felt different around me, lighter, freer, as though the walls themselves had been waiting for me to stand up and claim what was mine all along. I thought about the life I had lived, the sacrifices that had gone unseen, the love that had been taken for granted, and I realized that while betrayal had cut me deeply, it had also carved out a space where my strength could finally breathe. They stayed outside for a long time, their voices rising and falling, sometimes angry, sometimes desperate, sometimes quiet, as if waiting for me to open the door and let them back into the safety they had abandoned. But I did not move, because I had already opened a different door, one inside myself, a door to the part of me that no longer begged to be seen, no longer asked to be chosen, no longer clung to the hope that those who had betrayed me would suddenly understand my worth. My worth was mine to know, mine to hold, and in that moment it burned brighter than their laughter in Dubai ever could. I thought about the lessons hidden inside this pain, the truths I wished I had known sooner. That love without respect is not love at all. That silence in the face of betrayal only teaches others how to hurt you. And that sometimes the greatest gift you can receive is the one you never asked for. The gift of freedom, of finally seeing the truth clearly and choosing yourself. It was not an easy truth. It tore at me, it bruised me, but it also rebuilt me. And I knew that from this day forward, I would never again let myself be erased. And so I sat in that chair, with the quiet of my home wrapped around me like a new beginning, and I let myself smile. Not because the hurt was gone, but because I had survived it. Because I had turned it into something that could no longer control me. My 40th birthday had not been the celebration I had dreamed of, but it had become the day I gave myself the only gift that truly mattered. My dignity, my strength, my freedom. Thank you, my dear, for staying with me through this story until the very end. Your presence here means more than I can ever express. If my words touched you, if you felt even a small piece of yourself in what I shared, I ask you to subscribe, because I have many more stories still within me. Stories of truth, of pain, of quiet victories, and of the strength we sometimes only discover when life tries to break us. I would be honored to share them with you.